Okay, it's a nice October 14th, 2023. This is Mary Conley in Jacksonville. I'm going to go over some of my memories. I don't know if it's what they call eidetic memory or a visual memory is probably more likely. Here's my mom. I'm going to some of the earliest. It says, what are your earliest memories? I remember one time when I was very small, there was a bassinet on the screen porch. Later, my parents spent a lot of money and had a half bath put out there. Well, actually, Kyle Williams said it's a full bath because it had a shower and a toilet. I thought it was a half bath because it's just a shower, but whatever. So they had it enclosed eventually. It had plumbing and everything, and a little gas heater they had out there. And we all would go to the den and watch TV and stuff. But anyway, at that time it was a screen porch, and already knew that my mom and Mrs. Davis or some of the neighbors would come and they'd have a coffee clatch or whatever they call it in the kitchen, and I was on the porch. And my little brother was there. Not my little brother. My brother's 3 years older than me. He was born in 51 and I was born in 54. Well, I couldn't talk, and I must have been crying because my mom said, "What are you doing to Mary?" And he was there with a spoon and hitting the spoon on my lips. He said, "Oh, I'm just trying to feed Mary, And no, you're smacking my lips with the spoon. If I could have said it, I would have, but I wasn't able to talk at that point. And then another time, when it must have been around the same period, my mom had a jacquard sofa, and Mrs. Mays or someone, it was it wasn't Miss Pritchard. Pritchard, I think her name was, lived behind us. It wasn't the Mays yet. It was before the Mayses. Anyway, I was on some blankets and I was on that sofa. Again, I wasn't verbal. So it must have been like I started talking 11 months, so I don't know how old I was. But I couldn't do sentences and everything. But anyway, my brother came up with a little Captain Kangaroo face, or John Goodman or something, with face in there. Little cheeky face comes up right up to me, and I could turn my head and look at him, and he says, "Mom's left us." And I want to say, no, she's going across the way to play canasta. She's just across the yard playing canasta. She has not left us. Another time I remember my mom came out of the shower in her robe with her hair wrapped in a towel, and she had noxema. And my brother said, "Who's that? Who's that lady?" He would always say that. I remember one time he went up to the neighbors behind us, had a maid. And he went up and rubbed the lady's hand and said, "Are you made of Hershey chocolate?" And then another time our parents were gone and he was supposed to be watching me, and we were watching Alice in Wonderland. And we'd watched it, and it was crazy cartoon-like type of thing. And he opened the back door because he thought they were driving up the parking, up the driveway. And I saw a cat running down the road. And I thought it was the rabbit in the little, wasn't there a rabbit in a hat, in a JFK type hat? And I screamed like a banshee because I thought we were now in Alice in Wonderland. And Johnny ran all the way to the back of the house. And, "What did you do that for?" I said, "I thought I saw the cat in there, whatever it was." And was it a cat in a hat, or was it a rabbit? I think it was a rabbit that could talk and had a cane or something and a black hat. And I thought I saw it on the street. I said, "There's that rabbit, Poor Johnny. Okay, so those are some of my earliest memories. Another time, my father had been on a med cruise, and they realized I had a weak eye, a lazy amblyopia. And they must have been discussing it. I must have been about 20. I was about 3 years old then. And I had a tricycle, a metal tricycle, red. And my dad had this fence post out by the corner of the yard. I guess it was to mark the borders of the yard. But he had a wisteria growing there. He said, "Wisterias grow so long they can go up to the telephone lines." He said, "That's the problem with them. They won't stop growing." But anyway, he had a wisteria out there. And so I pedaled over there, pushed the bike behind the wisteria so it could be kind of camouflaged between the roots and the limb and the purple flowers and stuff. And I knew that there were no fences in the backyards yet. So I decided that I'd go to the strip mall, which is Cedar Hills Shopping Center. They had a W.S. Grant, and they had a Woolworths. And later on, I think that, the Woolworths, we'd go up there sometime, Mrs. Davis and Kathleen and I, and we'd sit there and, you get a banana split, or you get them, what do they call them, string fries, shoestring fries and with mustard, and a Pepsi in a glass and something. And you say, I'll pick this one. There were balloons, and they'd pop the balloon, and you might get 5 cents off a banana split, or you might get 25 cents off a banana split or something. And sometimes the budgies would get loose, the little parakeets. But anyway, this was before all that. I was real little, like 3 years old. And I went in the backyards because I knew not to stay on the street. I was like a little criminal or something. I didn't want to be on the street because I'd have to look down the street. There's Mary walking down the street. So I went in the backyards that didn't have fences, and I went parallel to the street as far as I could. But once I was escaped at the end of the block, I could get back on the road and find my way up to the store, where I took a little rubber knife and a pirate patch for my eye. And, they tried to cover my eye, the good eye, so my right eye would be stronger. My dad noticed when he came home from the Mediterranean cruise. He had one of them foot lockers that they talk about. That's why when they say, do you remember things? I remember things. I remember when Kathleen was about 3 years younger than me, or almost 3 years younger. She was one of my little buddies. And we were going to have a club. And actually, we were going to sell lemonade in the gutter at the end of the block. You know how they have a gutter where there's a drain, and you could sit on one side and use the drain as like a shelf, and we could sell our lemonade there, basically in the gutter by the Williamses thing. But we went down there for some reason, and there was a young man that was masturbating, and I think it was one of Gene Williams' sons. And I said, we've got a club. Would you like to be president of our club? And you know what to do. Must have been at least he didn't do anything to us, because he was just in the woods doing his thing. It wasn't our fault, But we just left that area. Then another time, when they had just were beginning to finish the Cedar Hills Theater, which was around 1964, 65, which I would have been about 10, and Kathleen then would have been about 7, and we had been up to Woolworths and A&P and and Grant, and we'd shop around. And then we were coming back, and we had to go by the either under construction or just recently constructed Cedar Hills Theater, which is on Blanding, and it's now a AutoZone or something. But anyway, it was a theater, and we waited and waited for that. There was a guy looked like, have you ever seen the little round Volvos they had in the 50s and 60s that were kind of like gray-blue? They were almost they looked like a cart, like something you see in Donald Duck comic books. But it wasn't really a Volvo. It was just an old model, small type car. Maybe, I don't know what they called them. Maybe an Opel, I don't know. But it was round like. It was a guy who looked a lot like Ed Asner. I mean, he was a charming guy, or Ed Asner, something like that. A little gray whisk around his head. Maybe like Laurence Olivier a little bit. But anyway, he had 2 pictures, 5x8 glossy photographs. And he said, would you look at this? And one of them looked like Annette Funicello, but she was nude. And she was standing there, I think, in heels and her bouffant hairdo, nude, and her hand was kind of halfway going over one of her breasts, and her other hand was going over her private part. And then he had a man, and it was the same thing, completely nude, studio-type background, blue and maroon or whatever. And he was standing there nude, maybe like Frankie Avalon or something, and that's what they look like. And I said, are these people married? Are they married? Because I figured, why they must be married if they're standing around nude, And I told Kathleen to run, and right in front of where that theater is, there was a country-style stucco home, and it kind of went up a hill. And it's still there. It used to be a radio shop. It's a really old house, and it had arches and like a green roof, and then it had like a cow gate. You know what I'm saying? The metal. So if a cow tried to walk out of the yard, it would be tripped by the little bars. The bars are built in the dirt, so the cows can't walk that way, because they say, oh, we're not walking over that. That's dangerous. We'll break our leg. So the cows doesn't walk that way. But it was up. So if you ran past the theater, you could go up. It would be hard to get a car to come out and go up that real quick, At least we'd be up away from him. So I said, run, Kathleen, run, So when people say, you don't remember what happened in 1967, but now I do know something about the encounter with Bundy. I knew something now that my mind would not let me realize. We may not have been going 5 days a week. We may have just gone 3 days a week. It was summer band. It didn't mean we were going all the time. And I've got a picture with me in that little red surfer shirt and a straw fedora. And we're at Mayport Naval Station. I'm standing there barefoot. Did have on the cutoff pedal pushers that were frayed. And my Aunt Opal and my Grandma Connolly are there. But Uncle Jerry and Aunt Shirley and Aunt Opal aren't in the picture. But what I think, and that was in August of 67, I said, well, that's weird. How did I get, things go from year to year because kids grow too fast. My arms would have been too big for that shirt the next year, and I'm saying kids grow fast. So I said, okay, so there I am in August, 12 years, 11 months, I guess. And Debbie and I met him in June. So I finally came to one conclusion is I wasn't going to be around. So we did run into him. The days were intermittent. So there was a day in between, be with Mom, be at the house, watch, Price is Right, whatever, be with Mom and this air conditioning, be in the house. Maybe practice a little. I did learn to play Little Brown Jug, I think, on that clarinet. But we were planning a trip to Daytona. So we usually had 2 weeks somewhere. But what I think my father did that year is he used 1 week with the family in June so my mom could see her brother Walter in Daytona. He worked for Highlight. He worked for Omni International. I don't know where. He worked for something. And he had a gold Cadillac and a pink poodle and all that. So he's down there near Highlight, Daytona 500. And Mary Andretti had a blue Corvette. A blue Corvette. He was spinning around. We'd go down to Daytona sometime, or we go up to Memphis, or we go to Philadelphia. So we must have gone to Daytona. I know we stayed at something called the Rip Van Winkle. And one of the things, they had rubber rafts you could rent, canvas rubber rafts, 50 cents an hour. And they had a little boardwalk, and there was like a cage with a chicken in it, and you'd put a quarter in it, and the chicken would dance. But I thought it was inhumane because it was really the hot plate under the chicken was getting hot. So the chicken was moving around because his feet were burning, basically. That's why I think that Stanos guy may have been around there. I don't want to say that because I don't know. Because some guy kept falling with his nose right up against me. I said, what is this guy? Mom acted like, they're so pretty. The guy's like this. But this guy's old, Mom. He ain't young. He shouldn't be following me around, but whatever. And then there were sharks, they say sharks don't come in schools, but we had gone down to the beach earlier, and we thought we saw all these dolphins flopping and doing in the water. We came back later and said, nobody goes in the water, there's sharks. Apparently, even though they don't go into schools, they will migrate some kind of way, or back then they did, because they were all acid in the place. Daytona's water is a little choppy, but we went there, and as a kid, you love it. And you want the motel to have a swimming pool and all that, But anyway, so then after the incidents of the Volkswagen ride, the red Volkswagen, I'm going to say about June 5th of 67, first, right that week, first day or two of summer band, then Debbie says, you can't write it in your diary. Your mom will read your diary and we'll get in big trouble. You have to rip it out. And I had written all this stuff in there. And it says June 17th, but that's too late. That didn't, but I was a little bit like Get Smart. I did put it ahead a little bit. And I wrote it in different ways in that diary too. Like, we thumbed right and called Hey Naked, but when he stopped, we ran away. And then another place I said, Vicky's sister boyfriend drove us to Burger King or something. Who knows? I was trying to, I don't know, camouflage it, but I knew my mom wasn't going to look in that diary. And let me explain why. My mom got that diary when I was in 6th grade. That's like an eternity. And I had this little bookshelf my dad had built for me. It had knickknacks, tween magazines, if they called it that, teenager, Mad magazine, comic books, Hardy Girl books, paint by number set, all junk, dusted up and old. My mom was not going after about a year. She probably said, well, I guess Mary's not going to journalize because I didn't write nothing in it. I only picked it up to write about the encounter. Anyway, so I carry the diary down to Kathleen's, and Debbie's happens to be between the houses, and that's when she said, you can't have it in your diary. And then I might have thought, well, one thing, his tag was out of state. He said something about college. I initially thought it was a Navy guy. And he said something about college. And he had an out-of-state tag. There was no college on the west side of Jacksonville, of Jones College, FSCJ. There wasn't no college, no type of college he was talking about. So he wasn't going to be around. And Vicky could take her. If I was not going to be there the next week, it was only 3 days, and I'm sure her sister could have given her a ride up there. So, and it was intermittent too. We weren't going to go like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think we only went about 3 days a week. And that's why in my little mind as it was, I didn't have to worry about Debbie. Besides which, I was a child. My next adventure is going to Daytona, which is probably wrong. The man did pull a gun on us, but he came up there, and I said, Debbie, I'll pretend to hitchhike. You know the story. And let me describe the Volkswagen because I have this memory. It was bright red, the kind of red you see on a nurse's uniform where they had those little Red Cross pins. It was so bright, it was an enamel red. The bumpers were solid chrome. They didn't have that black strip on them. The tag appeared to be white. It seemed to drop down an older model Volkswagen, but it was shiny and new. It was a new Volkswagen, and that was not a normal Volkswagen for Jeb Stewart Junior High School in 1967. It was not. And I said, hey, naked, because he didn't have a shirt on. So he jumps a curve over to where Debbie's, and I just immediately said, he sees Debbie. Debbie was wearing a peasant top, white. She was tanned. She had her hair sienna, was in a bob, sandals possibly, and cut off like jeans that had been frayed, real jeans, like Hager's, or what were them jeans called? Oh, hell, Wranglers. Yeah, I never can remember it. So she might be wearing Wrangler jeans, and everything was just so with her, GQ, I'm wearing pedal pushers and probably a Brothers Gant shirt. It wasn't the red shirt because I didn't have it yet. So we have the encounter. She opens the seat because the seat had a little white peg-like thing on the side. She said, get in. I said, no, just pretend. It's just pretend, Debbie. I said it like 3 times, but then I realized she was going to get in. You know what? Looking back now on the 56 years or whatever, thank God we both got in. Because what if she had got in and I said, no, I'm not doing it? Would I have been like Kathleen? Kathleen might have said, no, you go ahead. I'm not getting in that. And then she would have been dead. She would have been killed. Okay, this man he meant business. He was acting a certain way until we came around the corner by the cow field, which is Towers Hardware, and it's now a Kmart, and then it became an Amazon plant now. They've got an Amazon there. But back then it was just a cow field with a little round fence that went around it. And he pulled that gun out. And I said, what is your name? And he said, Theodore. And I said, Theodore? I said, what is your last name? And he said, Bundy. And I said, your name is Bundy like my clarinet, and your gun is silver like Debbie's flute. And then I said, Debbie's father's an admiral at NASA. Now, he's not an admiral. He was a commander at NASA. Joe Hogue, I think his name was, Hogue. I don't know. I can't find him. I think his name was Joe, but her next husband's name was Joe too, I think. So I don't know what the first husband's name was. It was a Clyde Hogue or something. I don't know. He looked like the guy, the father on the Waltons, or you ever that show that comes on TV called In the Middle? Those two guys, something like that. And because he had open Dutch face, and I saw him a few times. One time he came up from NASA or Cape Canaveral, and he had this piece of silver and silver plastic to me. It looked like he said, this is Teflon. They're using it in the space suits. So that sounds funny, space suits, so they won't burn up. They also had the Canadian heart attack book, Canadian exercise book. And then he talked about the Greek islands and Lesbos and stuff. I don't know why he was showing that. And then one time he made chicken cacciatore, but I don't know what he was there. But Mrs. Sexton, me and Mrs. Hogue never really, it'd be like a little tom girl, rednecky little girl that was immature, right? Childlike, and Joan Crawford or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's just, and she was bipolar, manic depressant. And she worked evenings. So, I said, well, that's okay. I don't know how to, but she always said my husband's a CO this and CO that, and your dad is, and Mr. Davis and your father are non-commissioned. I don't know what it was, but she made a point of that. But and I said, well, at least my dad ain't divorced, whatever. But anyway, whatever. She had a good heart in her way, but she was always very kind of volatile. And she worked evenings, so it didn't matter as long as it didn't mess up the house. You know, there were 4 women living there: Jeannie, Vicky, Debbie, and her mom, Jean. And it was Jean and Jeannie, which is odd. Now, I've thought about that too, because Jean, the mother, was a little younger than my mom. My mom was born in 26, assuming Mrs. Davis was born in 24. If Jean was born in like 30, and then Jeannie was a year younger, she was about 18 or 19 to Bundy's 20. So she would have been born in 47 or 48. So if her mom was born in 30, then she would have only been 17, 18, or 19 when she had Jeannie. Was she married to the commander then? I don't know. Because also Debbie and Vicky have more fair complexions, whereas Jeannie looked like a little, like Rita Moreno or something, you know. They had a young Audrey Hepburn or something, you know. And Jean looked just like Liz Taylor. She looked just like Elizabeth Taylor. And she did that on purpose. She was an organist. I'm not going to go into all of it, but I have found out a lot of information. And I hate the fact that people won't acknowledge that this man, why would you say, well, he had to be, he dropped out of school in March. The classes were over in April. And I think that was Puget Sound, but I can't be sure. But he dropped out. I don't know. You know, you have to withdraw or you get incomplete. And he was on a scholarship to Puget Sound as well, just so you know. I think he had a scholarship to Puget Sound as well as the summer scholarship to Stanford. And then they'll get those years all screwed up and stuff. I think something went on. Now I'm even wondering if Debbie might have gotten pregnant at some point. She was out there for the last 2 years of high school. Where did she go? I mean, you know, I know she might have been an international baccalaureate or doing some accelerated thing. But anyway, that's my story today. And I just wanted to let you know that I don't have a faulty memory. I remember the ropes on the windows. I remember the Johnson wax my father would use. All kind of stuff. So thank you. Bye-bye.